Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode from Break Turn. Today we have three people, which is going to be super fun. We've got Dustin Foote, super excited to talk about his story, and Austin Ross joining us today. So say hello, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Today is really, really cool because we're kind of continuing our focus on like A&P stuff. I know pilots are the hot commodity, but according to the last episode with Nick McMillan, the demand for A&P mechanics is almost higher, more so in demand than pilots. And so we want to continue to kind of spread the word about what that looks like because it's not as well known and streamlined, right? So Dustin's story is crazy. I was driving back, what was it, from Chattanooga a couple of weeks ago. And we spoke on the phone about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I was like, dude, this is going to be legit. If you don't mind, or Austin, if you want to introduce Dustin or you want to say hello, I don't know how we do it, but who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll introduce Dustin since he was
Cool.
kind of my connection. So I'm Austin Roth. I'm one of the co-founders with Landon at the Break Turn, and so I'm a retired Blackhawk pilot, just like Landon. I was on the conventional side, and so the way that I knew Dustin and our kind of common thread for Break Turn is that my unit I retired out of was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, flying Blackhawks there, and Dustin was one of my crew chiefs when I was there. And so for about a year or 2 years of my time that I was there, Dustin and I were in the same company. And then he went on to take over production control on the maintenance side. So he moved from that company to the maintenance company and started doing that thing. And so we've kind of stayed in touch a little bit over the years. And he has one of, if not the most successful maintainer story in terms of using all of kind of the different tools available for veterans. I don't know if he used every single one of them, but he's maybe used the most of anybody that I know, and has just turned his transition story into a real success on the maintenance side. And since 2025, as far as Break Turn is concerned, is the year of the maintainer. I thought it was a good story to highlight as somebody that just has been very, very successful doing that.
I'm not going to say you're famous, but Emery Riddle wrote 2 articles on you. So, I mean, for what it's worth, I think you're famous.
Hey man, sometimes when I see those articles, I feel famous, and thank you, Austin. I mean, it was great working with you in the military, and I'm happy that we can connect out here. And again, if telling my story helps someone else realize the possibilities or is sort of guideline or roadmap to make it easier on them than it was on me, then, that's a huge blessing and something I'd be happy to do.
Yeah, and we're kind
Yeah,
of
that's
hitting
awesome.
you're kind of hitting your stride in terms of kind of accomplishing everything that you hope to accomplish as you were transitioning out. I think you're there or very nearly there for being at hopefully the last job you'll have, maybe the last company you'll ever work at. And it's happened at a great time because we're about to unleash the maintenance pathway. So on the Break Turn Academy, app.breakturn.com, we've got a couple pilot pipelines already that basically kind of make it the easy button in terms of these are the things you need to accomplish and the questions that you need answered, and kind of formalize that. So we've got that on the pilot side, and we're building that out more and more every day. But we were passionate about also doing it for maintainers. Eventually it's going to be UAS and unmanned and all these other things. And it just happened that you were kind of getting to the pinnacle of that pathway at the perfect timing to kind of link up with us. And I think it's okay to say that we've brought you on to help with that as well, and make sure that we're getting the right information out there and the necessary information, making sure we're putting all those tools out as well. So a lot of things we're going to be talking about today are going to find their way onto or already are on the maintenance pathway, which by the time this goes live, the maintenance pathway on app.breakturn.com will already be live. So
Yeah, if you had contacted me, I got out in 2022. If you had contacted me in 2023, I probably could have spoke solely to the DoD Skill Bridge program. And, now thankfully I have the insight for both that as well as general aviation now that I've transitioned out of Boeing and back into the mechanic field. And while I got my A&P in 2019, this whole past year has really kind of opened my eyes to that side of it as well.
You're like a treasure trove, dude. You said skill bridge, man. Okay, let's start with like a little bit about your background in the military. You don't have to give us I went to basic here or there, but just kind of tell us what you did in the military, and then kind of at what point were you like, I want to transition out and I want to do maintenance. I want to explore this instead of like something different. If we want to start there, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent 8 years active duty, worked my way up to E5 promotable. Didn't get to make 6, unfortunately, because I decided to get out. But I was a Blackhawk maintainer. I think the official title is UH-60 helicopter repair and maintainer, 15 Tango. And I started that in 2014. Went to basic like everyone else, went to AIT at Fort Eustis, and learned how to work on helicopters there. Went straight from there to Fort Bliss, El Paso. Spent my first, I don't know, year and a half in ASB, or Aviation Support Battalion. Basically, a whole battalion that's nothing but aircraft maintenance. They don't own them, they don't fly them. They just support the other flight battalions. So did a lot of heavy maintenance there. A lot of phases, as we call them in the military. Everywhere else calls them C checks, D checks, things like that. Stripping the helicopter down, inspecting every portion of it, and putting it all back together and making sure everything's copacetic. Those are a scheduled maintenance inspection, as well as in-depth troubleshooting that was too involved for the flight battalions while fulfilling their regular mission. So when they had a problem bird, I can think of one that had severe hydraulic issues. And so they sent that down to us. And that ended up being 2 or 3 months of working on it. Come to find out that the reason it had massive hydraulic problems is because the airframe was twisted. And so the whole hydraulic manifold on the Section 6 pylon, it was never going to sit right. It was never going to rig right. And so that ended up being where we had to have the manufacturer, Sikorsky, come out and help us fix that. And that was actually a great opportunity because they ended up doing type certification for all of us for Sikorsky certified rigging instead of just the Army where they just kind of run you through the gist of it. But anyway, so I moved on from there and ended up in a Delta company for a short while with the 3rd Battalion out there at Bliss. I always wanted to be a crew chief. I always wanted to fly. So I already had a flight physical, even though I was just a maintainer and I wasn't even in a flight battalion or company. And as soon as the Delta company realized I had a flight physical ready to go, they were like, "You're going to flight company tomorrow." And so I moved up and I started flying and maintaining, and that was a blast. And I loved it very much. Ended up getting sent out to 12th Aviation, 2018. And there is where I was really able to find my groove, find my rhythm, and start seeing the bigger picture of all the planning and the managing and everything that goes into keeping the mission met and the aircraft flying. And so I moved on to kind of a supervisor role, or maybe a team lead, I guess you would call it, and then ended up being the maintenance manager there. And that got me noticed. My first sergeant transitioned over to Delta Company, the maintenance company, and their PC and COIC, who I worked with daily as the maintenance manager for my individual company, was PCSing. He was moving on to his next role. And they said, "Who's going to fill your spot?" And he said, "This guy right here." And so they came and talked to me. And first sergeant had a good experience with me while he was my first sergeant. And he was like, "Absolutely, I have no problem with that." And so they brought me over.
Shout out to Dennis Frazee, by the way.
Absolutely. Wonderful man.
Now Sergeant Major.
Yep. Awesome guy. Still talk to him regularly. Great to see where his career is going and what he's doing. And I'm grateful that there's, leaders like him out there for young soldiers like I was once. So he's doing great things. And so that took off. And I'm not going to lie, it was trial by fire. I mean, 100%. The first month I was absolutely hitting the ground running and trying not to trip. And I had so much to learn. Like I said, I learned a lot when I first got there on what went into the company level management. And once I got to the battalion level managing, 34 permanent aircraft and 9 rotational aircraft, and, involving rotational units and stuff like that, all the planning and funding and parts and all the logistics that went into it. That's where I really, really grew up, and I grew up quickly. And I actually enjoyed it, even though it was quite challenging. I enjoyed the challenge, and I enjoyed being able to think about the secondary and tertiary effects of every decision. And I was like, you know what, I want to do this long term. My plans got a little derailed. My daughter was born in 2021, and I thought that would push me to stay in and make it a career. And as soon as I saw my little girl, I said, "That's it, man. I got to go home." I grew up surrounded by family and attended family events. And, my dad was military. I didn't live with him, but he was gone all the time. And I didn't want that for her. So as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh, now I have a problem. And I was, at the time I was due to ETS later that year. And I extended 1 extra year so I could get more experience and kind of figure my life out. And that's when I really started diving into the possibilities with my A&P and my military experience and what can I do. And as you mentioned, the skill bridge, obviously I was able to do the DoD skill bridge program. And that was something, for me, it felt like I learned about very last minute. My personal opinion, TAPS is too late. If you're in SFL TAPS or you're in the window for SFL TAPS, and you're just now starting to think about what you want to do afterwards, it's too late. You got to start sooner. You got to start networking.
So TAPS is 2 years out from your ETS or EAOS or EAS, depending on what branch, but for Army ETS. So TAPS is 2 years out. At the point you decided to extend for a year, where were you from when you would have gotten out otherwise in terms of TAPS? Had you already started TAPS? Had you already like
Uh,
kind of how did that happen?
so I think I actually extended while my wife was pregnant because my daughter was due in August and I was due to August of 21 and I was due to process out November of 21. And I was like, that's a close window. There's a lot
Okay.
to figure out. You're learning how to be a parent. There's a lot of financial risk, and doctor's appointments and things like that. And I said, you know what? I know that I cannot get out right now successfully. So I extended a year. I was like, I need to sit down,
So
put my nose to
this
the
was a strategic pause of, hey, I need an extra year. And baked into that extension, was it extending at the unit as well?
I believe so. I remember extending. Unfortunately, I don't really remember all the details of it.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it wasn't at the time, it wasn't extending to guaranteed get out. It was extending to figure out what I was doing. There were other things I wanted to do. I had thought about putting in a warrant officer packet and being a pilot like you guys. And because that was a dream at one point. And, there's a lot of things up in the air and I just wasn't sure about any of it. So I was like, you know what? I need to take a breather. I need to take this weight off my shoulder if I need to figure it out tomorrow. And I need to sit down and really line out the pros and cons of all these paths and see what's best for me and my family.
No, that's really good. I think one thing that extension year, and I want to kind of double tap on that for a second, and not that we are the standard of normalizing things, like who are we, but I do like to kind of pause there and kind of tell folks it is very normal when you're getting out to have that hesitancy and that like, man, what am I doing? Like, what am I going to do? So I appreciate you sharing that. What would you say was your biggest fear? Maybe not fear is a bad word, but like, what was your biggest concern when you decided to get out that perpetuated the year extension? And then did you feel prepared to get out? Why or why not?
It's not a great answer, but money. Money was the biggest fear. And while the money in the military isn't great, it's structured. You know what you're getting. You know when you're getting it. It's easy to set up bills. Everything comes in on the 1st and the 15th. Of each month, so it's easy to schedule your payments and budget your money. And I spent my whole adult life in the military. I left for the military as soon as I became an adult, and so the thought of relearning everything, and that seems so simple with getting paid every 2 weeks instead of on the 1st and 15th of every month. Even that scared me because your paychecks move around. Sometimes they're on the first week, sometimes they're on the second, whatever. And not, I grew up, my family was rather, I don't want to say poor, but we were not well off, and that was not fun, especially growing up, being a kid. It wasn't fun, not having money and being broke and things like that. And that's something I obviously never wanted for my daughter. And so I wanted to know that if I got out, that I was going to have something that I could do and progress at and be good at and, have a successful career, because that sense of satisfaction that I got from the military, moving up and learning and growing and becoming a leader and things like that, I wanted to know that I could continue to do that and not just be in some dead end job, so that I wasn't miserable for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that was hard to walk away. And I still think about that sometimes today is, I had gotten to a point in the military where I was achieving things and, I was a leader, and in my personal opinion, I was a respected and liked leader and I was good at what I did. And so it was kind of hard to walk away from that. I was a little afraid to kind of be the bottom guy on the totem pole again, but you don't stay there, just because you come in and you're new doesn't mean you're going to stay that way. And that's something I realized later on.
Yeah, I think
It's
money.
funny. Well, I was just going to say that it's funny because I had kind of a similar experience in that I felt like I needed more time, which kind of got solved for me because I tore my ACL, which was then going to be my third and eventually my fourth knee surgery. So I ended up grounded for a year. So that kind of year that you extended where you felt like you needed a little extra time to figure out what you were going to do, were you going to stay in, were you going to get out? If you get out, what are you going to do? I had that kind of built in as well through different means. Would not suggest tearing your ACL to do it, but I needed the same thing. And this is coming from the pilot side. So I can certainly appreciate that. And actually, you probably don't remember this. And we're going to talk about SkillBridge eventually. But when I found out about your SkillBridge, you'd already moved to Delta Company. I was still in Alpha Company. And I was getting ready to do a follow-up with my orthopedic surgeon. And you were there. I think you'd done something to your foot or ankle maybe. You remember that?
My ankle's destroyed, so I was probably getting checked out for that.
Yeah, and so we just ended up in the waiting room at the same time, and I hadn't seen you in a while, and so we were catching up, and that's when you told me about your SkillBridge. So I remember that and you were like, oh, it's with this company, which again we'll talk more about that in detail. I don't want to spoil it. And I was like, oh, that's really awesome, that's really cool. So you were one of the first crew chiefs that I knew of that did it, and I still remember vividly that conversation.
Yeah. And it's crazy, man. When I started out processing all these programs that were available, I had never heard of them. I didn't know anyone who did them. You know, when people got out that I knew coming up in the Army, they just got out. That was it. You know, and everyone talked about SFL taps like, oh, it's this dumb thing they make me go to. I didn't get anything out of it. And that's nothing against the Army's SFL tap program. That's really more towards the individuals. Because once I went, I realized there were a lot of benefits to it. And there were a lot of things that I was like, man, I'm really glad that I'm in this course. You know, and those were things that even if they weren't the end all be all resource or skill, they were the foundation. And I was able to build from there and use those later on and develop those initial skills to help me succeed out here.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I'm glad you bring that up because I appreciate TAPS and any other transition offices, and they do a really good job for what their utility is. Their utility is they're just trying to give you an idea of what's out there, but the breadth of post-service jobs from graphic designer to, I know at Campbell, they really push the CDL, truck drivers to airlines to corporate. I mean, it's so big, and we can't expect the TAPS office to have the granular detail for all of those careers. But what that does do is it allows you to be in the arena of finding these programs you didn't know about. You said there's a lot of programs you didn't know about, right? And it's like awesome. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here at Break Turn is if you want to do anything that's remotely close to aviation, you know, where our name is in the TAPS offices, our hope is that they send you to us. And if you don't want aviation, if you want to go into construction, they'll send you to someone in construction. But folks think that I would propose that folks think that TAPS is going to, as the military does, they're going to put you in line and guide you to CIF to the next job. And that is not what it's for. And so to shift your brain to say, I'm going to go to TAPS and start the process of learning what I want to do, that's a healthy way of looking at TAPS than just like, oh, they're going to get me my next job. Negative. That's not how that works. I mean, is that what you experienced too?
Yeah, a little bit. And I probably shouldn't, I don't know. The thing that sticks out the most to me is the resume building class. I think it was 1 or 2 days. We had to sit down and build our resume with all our military experience. And what I learned when I started applying for jobs after I applied to 40 jobs and I didn't hear back on any of them is that resume was worthless. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, you know, and I asked a friend of mine, the same friend that helped me with the SkillBridge connection. You know, he had been in the civilian market for a long time. He got out of the Army long before I did. And he's like, well, I was talking to him about it. You know, hey man, I'm not hearing back anything, you know, no, nothing. And he's like, well, let me take a look at your resume. And I sent him my resume and he goes, oh my gosh, what is this? This sucks. And it was basically just a normal resume like anyone else's, but it was all my military experience in military jargon and phrasing and everything. And so it didn't make sense to anyone. When they look at it, it's like, you can't say PC non-commissioned officer in charge or PC NCOIC. That means nothing to anyone. And in most civilian aviation companies and whatnot, I've learned PC stands for parts control and it's a logistics department. Whereas I was listing it as PC for production control. And, you know, I manage the maintenance and daily operations for 43 aircraft. And so they're seeing a mixed match. They're seeing, okay, this kid either used AI or something and didn't put it in right. So it's saying the title is a logistics job, but the description or the experience is a manager job. So that doesn't connect, you know, and I learned a lot of that along the way. You know, I've probably made over 100 resumes at this point, and with every single one, I've learned something. So,
And that's huge because it again normalizes that. I've said it a million times. The resume is one of a million. Every time you apply for a different job or a different company, you should probably change your resume. So if there's this idea that you're going to get this silver bullet of a resume, like that doesn't exist. But and we'll talk about it later in the conversation here. But I'm like want to stop my foot and say, as you're looking to transition, the networking piece, getting with someone who can help you with the language of your resume, how you should present yourself to pursue this or that. I mean, that is so key because yeah, a resume that says all that you did on your NCOER, your fit reps or whatever, that's fine. But then someone reads it and PC means parts control. And it's literally a language. It's a language barrier almost, where it's like you have to speak their language, but you don't know that until you talk to somebody who's in that arena who can say, this is not great. Your resume is not great for what we need to do. So that's huge for people to be aware that you have to seek those things out and use your networking and your tools to your advantage to make sure that what you're saying, like how you present yourself, is actually how it's received on the other end of the resume. So that's cool.
Well, we just sat in, so break term, we were just at Milda Civ, which is Vertical Aviation International, which used to be Helicopter Association International. So they've got a nonprofit that they support, Milda Civ, which is a day-long kind of semi-seminar and also opportunity to meet a lot of employers. And so during the seminar part of it, one of the hiring managers got up there and said, "Hey, we have a problem. Sometimes somebody will put, Blackhawk repairer, for instance." And the way that they read that is you can only repair Blackhawks.
Yes, and that's
Versus
something
aircraft repair.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're like, and it's not, and so in the military, sometimes we read that as like, but that's not really what my actual job is, because that's not what my evaluation said, or that's not what my actual duty position, paragraph, and line number said, for the actual assignment itself. It's not untrue to say I'm an aircraft repairer.
Yeah.
I do.
And
a Blackhawk is an aircraft.
That's something I was going to touch on later, when we get back on the topic of resumes is, I ran into that a lot. I was putting UH-60 helicopter repairer on some of those, the different years that I was doing that, or the different places I was doing that. And, I learned that same trick. I'm an aircraft maintainer, and it didn't even occur to me with my A&P, but, they see A&P, but then they see that I only worked on Blackhawks. And so, especially for the automated systems or recruiters that are just going to skim through it and look for key points or keywords or just those job titles rather than actually reading everything, because they're trying to get through, 100 applicants and they got to narrow it down quickly. They're going to see UHC and they're going to go, what's a U60? And maybe they look it up and maybe they don't, and so for like the general aviation jobs, like the one I have now, I was putting aircraft maintainer. After a while, I learned to put that. Whereas I applied for a few helicopter roles with PHI medical and air methods, air medical. And on those, I would specifically put helicopter, helicopter maintainer rather than UH-60. And it's not a lie. It's not a fib. You're not saying something that isn't true. What you're doing is, isolating or triggering that keyword, so that they see, oh, helicopter maintainer for 8 years. Awesome. And then they can have that face-to-face conversation with you. And that's, a lot of times what I've seen is even just a phone call or that video chat or that in-person interview. If you can get to that point, it is so much easier to really explain what you've done rather than a 1.5 or 2 page resume. That doesn't tell who you are as a person or how much you truly know. It just says things that you've done for a certain amount of time. And I found those in-person interactions are really where things move forward.
Yeah, I think, and again, and I love these conversations because it meanders, which is what I love about these little episodes. BreakTurn isn't a resume advising company per se, but we can give you tips, right? All that we're talking about is go to, I have a thing on LinkedIn I used to have where you set what you're looking for in terms of a job, and it will send you notifications every time a job comes up. And would you have it? There's a job description of what they're looking for in that job. You go to JS Firm, future BreakTurn, and they have on there the qualifications they're looking for. And so you literally copy and paste, pneumatics, hydraulics, electric, avionics, sheet metal, engine shop. Like you can say that as a Tango or as anybody who works in maintenance. And because if you don't, like you said, they're going to skip it. They're going to say UH-60 repairman. And for you, you're like, that's my thing. That's my number one bullet. And then they literally just gloss right over it. And you're like, whoa, like, no. Like that, you just missed the main part. And they're like, well, as the applicant, is your job to walk the dog for them. They aren't going to walk the dog for you. And it feels weird because we're used to speaking the same language with our evals, and it's just not the same in the civilian world. So that's really
one of
good.
the things that we can do while we're not, the BreakTurn Academy, BreakTurn proper, we're not ever going to be, hey, come get your resume done by us necessarily.
Yeah.
But we do have resources, and we can, just like resume prep for the airlines, I don't think it's something that exists right now in the maintenance pathway, but that is something that will exist in the future is, hey, if you need help on a resume, there are places that can do that we've vetted, that we trust, that we think are valuable, either free resources or paid resources. But it's stuff that we think is actually useful. And so that kind of thing is what we're looking to do on the maintenance pathway, because we do need to make it a little more accessible, because people don't understand that you have to defeat the actual algorithm on the computer sometimes and the human algorithm. I was just on a call with somebody that was lamenting just how hard it is to actually defeat that first line, which is get your resume beyond the I've input my resume, right? Get the first callback. That's the hardest thing. And they were kind of dogging on recruiters, like, oh, these recruiters are just lazy, kind of that attitude a little bit. And I said, no, I don't think that's the case. I know a lot of recruiters, I know a lot of people in the recruiting business. That's not the case. What they are is they are efficient. It's just a matter of efficiency because they've got X number of roles to fill.
That's all right. Just keep it
Dustin
rolling.
disappeared. So they've got X number of roles to fill, and they only have Y amount of time. And so a matter of efficiency, they've got to be as fast at that as they can. And one of the ways that they do it is, number one, sometimes it actually is just on the computer. It's an algorithm, and it doesn't even show it to a human. If it's a big enough company, that's how it is. And if it doesn't have the right keywords in there, like you said, Dustin, it's never going to make it to the next level. On the other side is the humans, which kind of operate in a similar way as an algorithm. We focus on certain things, and things that we can read quickly and sort through quickly. We're going to do that. And so if it doesn't have the right keywords on there, or it's got the wrong keywords in there, then it's going to the no pile. Because I know that if I've got 100 resumes and I need to fill 10 jobs, and 25 of them pass my first look test, well, I've got 25 applicants to fill 10 jobs. And that's just a matter of efficiency. And if I was less efficient, then they're going to fire me and find somebody else.
Yeah,
and so I wouldn't dog on the recruiters for that.
No. And everyone's got a job to do, and everyone's got pressure to do it as fast and as efficiently as they can. And every company is in a rush, and every company's trying to save money where they can. And that's just business. It's not personal. It's not anyone doing anything, they're not trying to be vindictive or lazy or anything like that. It's just, the motion of the ocean.
Yeah. And I know a cheat code that I'll tell folks is you can use like ChatGPT, you can use AI, you can put what you think is your resume, you can upload it, you can literally upload the file, a Word document, and you can upload my hands are disappearing, and I like to talk with my hands, so I'm sure you can imagine them. I'm in a hotel room, so that's why I've got this sweet background. But you upload your resume, and then you upload the job that you're looking to apply for, and you can tell AI, hey, can you translate this into this language? Because you're like, I don't know how to do it. And then after a while of doing that, you'll see I was the director of maintenance as a PC and COIC.
Exactly.
That is a fair thing to say. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's all about learning those corresponding, and that's something that I learned just from looking at jobs and coming across the director of maintenance role. And I'm like, I did these things, I did all of this. Mm-hmm. And, because originally when I was just trying to pretty up my resume and make that position sound better, it was like, just senior maintenance manager or something like that. And then I came across my first director of maintenance role, and I was like, oh my gosh, this was my job. This is what I did. And so that's
what's the difference in pay between senior maintenance and director of maintenance?
In the company, anywhere from $20,000 to $45,000.
Yeah. So if you use the wrong phrase, you're costing yourself $20,000 to $45,000 a year.
Absolutely.
Potentially. Yeah, it's not insignificant. So I got a question again. At this point, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. You take your year-long break. You're starting to work on your resume and everything. Did you have your A&P already at this point?
I did. Yeah, I got my A&P in 2019. I got it for selfish reasons. For the Army, actually, it wasn't just to get out. I got it partially as insurance, so that if I did get out, I knew that I could earn a higher wage. Because non-licensed mechanics at the time, I think I heard they were making like 30 to 34 an hour, whereas A&Ps at the time, at least with the airlines that most people would talk about, were automatically at $42 an hour with an A&P. And that's because most of the airlines have a A&P premium. And so if you are brought on at $36 an hour as an aviation maintenance technician, but you have an A&P, that's now $41 an hour. And they do that, one, to, I guess, reward you for having an A&P, and two, I think, to encourage people to get an A&P. And I mean, it's still the same job post. It's still the same job role as a non-A&P, but you're just getting that premium because you went the extra mile and got that certification.
So you got that certification in 2019, though. So how did you do that? Like, how was that?
The second reason that I got it was because I wanted to apply to a particular unit in the military, and part of their pipeline, and I'm sure you're familiar with this unit, sir. I can't stop calling you sir.
It's terrible.
old Army habit. It's a particular unit with a particular mission set, and part of their pipeline is getting an AMP, and because they work on non-standard aircraft, and so I thought that I'd give myself a leg up on my application by getting the AMP to give me a little better chance of being brought to assessment and things like that, and that worked out for me. But anyways, I tried going through the Army Cool program. They had given a PowerPoint presentation to the unit about the benefits available for us to get AMPs, and that, no one, it kind of got swept under the rug or maybe just forgot about over time, and no one was really using it. They talked about the Army Cool program. They talked about using your GI Bill and things like that. They talked about the schools that we could use our military experience. Well, getting your AMP, you can use your military experience to apply for your 8610-2s, which are we call them tickets, to go and do your oral and practical evaluations. And you can just go that route. You can talk to the FAA, fill out the paperwork, get approved for those tickets, and take them directly to an DME and be evaluated. I wasn't comfortable doing that because the only aircraft I'd ever worked on was a military Blackhawk. And so I elected to go to one of I hate to call it a crash course, but a summarized course. There we go. There are schools you can go to that are 2 years long or 2.5 years long and things like that to learn how to be a mechanic and be eligible to test for your AMP. And then they have the summarized courses for people who've already been working in the industry, not just military, but if you have 3 years of aviation maintenance experience, you are qualified to apply for the 8610-2s and evaluate through the oral and practical and written exams to get your AMP. And so I decided to go through American Airman Ground School in Long Island, New York. It was a 2-week course, I think maybe 2.5 weeks. And I was able to thankfully go through the unit, and the unit authorized it and didn't charge me leave or anything like that, which was beneficial. I did reach out to the Cool program, but man, getting an accurate or current contact for that was almost impossible because it's basically one office with an NCO and an officer, and that's it. And the information that they had presented in the PowerPoint presentation was several years out of date, and the Army website at the time was not updated. They were doing that whole transition from AKO to whatever the new portal is, and so everything was kind of getting lost in the wash. And so I ended up using my GI Bill because I wanted to get it done. After several months of trying to get in touch with people, I just kind of got frustrated, and I was like, you know what? I have the GI Bill. I'm going to use it. It cost me 2 months of my GI Bill, which out of 36 months, I mean, I think it was worth it. Compared to the $8,000 or $10,000 it would have cost me to pay out of pocket for that course. And so, yeah, the course was amazing. You show up ready to take the writtens. That's on you. They give you some study material when you sign up. Studied the books, had a little study app, and showed up, took the written exams the first 3 days, and then spent the next 4 days in the classroom with an instructor. And really all they do is just familiarize you with things that you haven't seen until now. I was a helicopter mechanic working on turbine engines and rotorcraft and hydraulic systems and all that. So that's what I knew. But a lot of the AMP, and I hear it's changed since then. At the time, a lot of the written exam for like airframe was fabric wings and doping and wood frames and things that I had never seen or heard, And so in the classroom, at least, they familiarized us with magnetos, timing magnetos, some of the general aviation standard tasks that you're going to see on a daily basis and that you're going to be probably evaluated on during your practical and oral. And so they really just get you familiar with all that and really make the most of the experience you already have so that you're more prepared for those evaluations. And thankfully that school had the DMEs internal. They had 3 DMEs on site. And so as soon as we finished testing and everything, we had the weekend to study for ourselves. We could use the classroom if we wanted, and the instructor would be there if we had questions. And then starting Monday through Thursday of the following week, because I think it was the week of Thanksgiving, was the DME evaluations. And so they would just say, hey, here's your day, here's your instructor, this is where to be, when to be. Showed up in coveralls with headlamp and a flashlight, and just kind of knocked out the oral examination right away. Kind of a rapid fire. Actually reminded me a lot of A-part evaluations, which kind of made me laugh.
For non Army, they call it something different. It wasn't A-part.
Okay.
I'm not asking what it stands for, but just like what general.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So the A-part was my annual evaluation as a flight crew member. I was evaluated on all the different regulations and technical manuals that I was expected to know and be able to speak to regarding, different, characteristics of flight or medical things and maintenance things and stuff like that, to show that I was a competent and capable flight crew member, that I was intelligent and had all that stuff in the back of my head so that I knew that if I experienced hypoxia, what those symptoms were or how to counteract it or how to, know when I was becoming spatially disoriented and things like that so that I could be a functioning member.
So similar environment to your annual proficiency exam that you do in the military with an academic, where you're just sitting and talking about things. You're not putting your hands on anything yet. You're just talking about it.
Yep, and they
Cool.
from what I understand, they put in they have a system, through the FAA. They put in your name and all this, that, and the other, and it generates or populates a list from a pool of predetermined questions, and a lot of it's from the study material, and they just kind of go through and they test you there, and you answer the questions, and as long as everything goes okay, then you move on to the practical examination where you're doing actual physical tasks on an aircraft. So that was a great experience.
So real quick, I just want to, just a definition of terms. So I'm thinking of the or the person who's like, I want to do this. So you talked about tickets in the FAA. What are those? Do you just, if you show up and say, I worked on a phase is the C inspections, a major maintenance for any aircraft. Do you take a military record, and does that count as tickets for the FAA? Do you have like a maintenance logbook that you kept? Like, what would that look like for someone who doesn't know anything?
So we have a job book in the military. I didn't use mine in my process because they weren't new at the time, but we had just started actually updating them and using them. I had not seen them for the first 6 years of my career. And then I guess there was a big push that we needed to be using those more. And so literally a couple months before I did this. But what I did was I reached out to the FSDO.
What's a FSDO? What's a FSDO? Is that?
Gosh, what's it stand for, Austin? Flight Standardization District Office or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
And so the FAA,
it's an FAA office. Yeah.
Okay.
So FAA office, I reached out to the one closest to us there in Alexandria. I don't remember which one it was. And I went there first. And unfortunately, they were not familiar with using your military experience to apply for an A&P or the tickets to take your A&P exams. So that was kind of a wash. And then I contacted the one in Richmond, Virginia, and they were all about it. They knew all about it. They were like, oh yeah, absolutely. We have every first Wednesday of each month. You guys can come on down. We'll just put you on the schedule and we interview you and go over your paperwork. And so the paperwork was just kind of, I think I had to bring my ERB to show that, this is my job. My enlisted record brief showed this is my job. I think I brought a copy of my AIT graduation certificate, and then I had to have a memorandum or a memo of recommendation or maintenance experience or something along those lines from a maintenance representative. And so I got it from our MTP, our maintenance test pilot, who was kind of the warrant officer side. Obviously, he was a pilot and did all the maintenance test flights and things like that, but he also helped with maintenance planning and scheduling and long-term goals and things like that, or rather I helped him. And so he gave me a official Army memo, that said, Sergeant Foote is this, Sergeant Foote has been doing this for this long, he has this much experience, and signed and date and all that, to have kind of a letter of recommendation saying that I am an experienced maintainer. And I went in, and again, they were super familiar with it. This was a thing they normally did. And so I showed up, and I think there was 8 or 9 of us, all military from different branches around the area. They had us fill out the forms there on site for the 8610 form, which is, I think it's authorization to test or something like that. It's an FAA form. And then they peeled us off one at a time and kind of did an interview. And I was really nervous going into it. I'm not going to lie. And then when the guy came over and grabbed my folder and told me to come with him, he flips it open and he goes, oh, you're a Tango. Cool. This will be quick. And I was like, yes. Because I didn't know anyone who had done this. I didn't know anyone who had gone through it. So it was all new. And I was the first one going through trying to do it through the unit. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to screw it up for everyone else because I didn't do it right or something. And if I did it well and it went well and smooth for me, then I could maybe, the unit was going to hopefully send other people, which they ended up doing later. And I wanted to make sure that was available to everyone. And anyway, so I went in, interviewed with them, talked about my experience, what I had done, some cross training with hydraulics and sheet metal and things like that. Talked about the phase maintenance. I talked about the line maintenance to show that I have that holistic, experience with maintenance. It's not just one thing. I'm not a one-trick pony, and that I've kind of been all over and done a lot. And so, yeah, we talked for about 5-10 minutes, and he was like, all right, man, well, good luck with your tests. And thanks for coming by. He signed my tickets and sent me on my way. I then turned around and submitted those to the school with my, I had to talk to the VA, obviously, and get the, letter of eligibility for my GI Bill. And so that the school could get paid for me to take the course. Turned all that in and picked a date. and set that up with the unit and got all the forms filled out through the military so that I could go and do that course. And and I did the course. Like I said, I did the oral examination when I got to my DME, moved right on from that. I think I showed up at 6 a.m. and by 7, we were in the hangar doing actual practical hands-on tasks. He'd give me 2 or 3 tasks at a time. I'd knock them out. He'd evaluate me or, look at them, tell me yes or no, and then move on to the next 3. And I think about 11:30 or noon, I walked out of there with my temporary, at least AMP in hand. And we filled out all the paperwork. So he gave me one that was signed by him and signed by him and signed by me. And it's just a temporary little form. And then the official card came in the mail a couple weeks later.
So I think that's one thing I think it's one thing people don't understand as well. So for Blackhawk maintainers, for Tangos especially, you do have experience doing airframe and power plant. But when you're talking about the AMP, it can be airframe or it can be power plant or it can be both.
Or general. There's also the general
Or
section.
general. Yeah, or general. And a lot of people paint themselves into a corner because they don't realize that it doesn't have to be there. There's essentially a list that was pushed out to the FAA for the FSDOs. And it said this list of MOSs, of military occupational specialties, they correspond to an A or a P or an AMP or a general. And that was kind of an easy way for them to correlate those things, but that's not the only way to correlate those things. So you can have an MOS that is just one or the other, but you could have been cross-trained in the shops and you could have actually had experience doing either or both. And when you were talking about you have to provide a memo anyways, the letter can specify that you've got X amount of experience doing the other side of things, and you can actually qualify for your AMP, even though on that paper it doesn't look like you necessarily would, because of your actual experience. So it's not that letter from the FAA. If anybody's listening to this, just keep in mind that is as a service member, that is a place to start. It's not where they should end though, because you may have individual experiences that qualify you for the other side as well.
Yeah, I have a friend that was a Apache armament technician for a long time, and he wasn't always needed in his armament role. There's not always work to be done on the 30 mic or any of the weapon systems on the Apache. And so when he wasn't in demand, he would cross-train and help out the hydraulic shop or the engine shop and things like that. And he was able to use that and get one of his leaders to actually give him a memo, and he got his AMP because he'd been doing that for 12 years, And so, big thing I tell people is seek those things out. If you can broaden your horizon, if you can broaden your experience and you have the opportunity, then do it. You're never going to know if you don't ask,
No, I love that. And so a couple questions here. So someone who wants to follow your path, they say, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to a FSDO, can Google that. And then I got to submit my records. I got this memo of what I've done. You can get your certificate of eligibility, your letter of eligibility from GI Bill, which is just va.gov, or just Google it and it will show you how to do it. You click submit, and a couple weeks later it comes in the mail, and I think they email it to you. My first question is, how did you find, if you just tell me what the Long Island school was, how did you find that? Like how did you figure that one out? Because Long Island is up here and Virginia's down here. And why did you decide to do that? Because someone could say, well, you were already fully qualified to take your test. Why did you decide to take 2 weeks and burn 2 months at GI Bill? Because you had a reason. We talked earlier. I want you to share why you chose to do that after you share how you found the school.
Yeah, when the unit talked about it and was trying to get people to go through it, the one that they all knew, because a lot of them had been stationed down there, was, I think, TCI is the name of the school. It's in Tennessee, I believe. And just from being around that area, they knew about it because they like to market to the military maintainers in the area, because they know that people are going to want to take the course and hopefully get their AMP. And so I was like, well, I don't know about going to Tennessee. And I just kind of started looking at the options, and I came across that school in Long Island. At the time, it was ran by a retired Navy individual. And yeah, I think I came across it by Googling, actually. I think I was just Googling, AMP courses and stuff, and, summarized courses. It's been so long now, it's hard to remember exactly what I was searching, but I found them, I called them, and I talked to the office first, and they put me straight through to the owner. And he was like, absolutely, man, come on down. He's like, just get your tickets. If you're going to use your GI Bill, get that set up. If you're going to pay for it, then set that up, and we'll get you over here. And, I told him I need a little bit of flexibility, because if I get approved right away, that doesn't mean I can come next week. I gotta set it up with the unit, and I gotta make sure that, since they were allowing me to go, that I wasn't hindering the unit during an important mission or something, because like, hey, I just got to dip out now. And so we had to set it up a few months out, which was a little unorthodox for them. Normally, someone calls and they start the next week. And so that's what we did. And as I said, I went through the course because I wanted to make sure that I did it right, and that because it's a lot of money. If you go to a DME directly, luckily through that school, the DME fee was $850 even. That's it. I've heard, especially now, I've heard people go to a DME and they want $1,400 per test.
Yeah, DME, to put a pin on that. So a DME is like, was a designated maintenance evaluator. They're the ones
Something
that
like
sign
that. Yeah.
off your,
Examiner, yeah.
they're the FAA guy or girl who can sign off your performance to get you that rating. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And so that was it was $850, and that gets paid directly to the DME. That's not part of the school. That's beyond the cost of the school. And I knew that there were things that I weren't familiar with. At first I was very confident. I thought, oh, I work on this advanced $20 million aircraft with turbine engines and all these different complex systems. I'll be golden. And then I started studying, and I was like, there isn't anything about helicopters or turbine engines or hydraulic systems or any of that in this study manual, or the study book. It was a lot of piston, general aviation, piston-driven aircraft, reciprocating engines, oddly enough. Like I said, fabric wings, wood frames, fabric doping. A lot of the sheet metal stuff was more questions about oxyacetylene torches and, conditions for painting and what types of paint have zinc in them and things like that I had never had to know, But
Like Carc paint.
yeah, I mean, it was
Whatever
so
the
much.
OD green stuff the Army paints all their helicopters, like that's the one kind of paint.
Arc paint. And so I was just, I'm studying, and I was like, oh man, I don't know 100%, because I didn't know how easy or hard the evaluation was going to be. And I was like, you know what, give myself a little breathing room, give myself a little more confidence, that I'm not going to spend $1,400 to be evaluated and fail. I was like, I have these opportunities, I have these benefits available to me through the GI Bill. So let's do it, absolutely. I talked to the VA. They said it'll, that course will cost me 2 months, which at the time didn't make a lot of sense since it was 2 weeks. But again, in hindsight, it was worth it, because I felt like I breezed right through my evaluation. I wasn't stressed. I was a little nervous in the morning when I first got there. And then after I talked to the guy and started doing the tasks, I was like, okay, this isn't that bad, And I mean, I was doing my practical evaluation for like 4 hours.
Jeez.
And so, I mean, it wasn't hard, but it was, a few things. I almost felt like I was overthinking it, because I was like, there's no way the task is this simple. Yeah. And a few other things, like I had to blend an aluminum propeller blade. He walks up to a propeller that's mounted on the wall, and he goes, let's say you have a ding on the leading edge of this blade, right? Wham! Nails it with a ball peen hammer. And he goes, tell me if that's blendable. Tell me where you found if it's blendable or not, or where you found the criteria. And if it is blendable, then blend it. And I was like, okay, cool. That's something I've never done. But I knew to look in the 43.13 Bravo, which is is that the aviation circular? My bad. Kind of a Bible for just general aviation maintenance through the FAA. One of the books you're required to have as an A&P. Broke that guy out, read through it, found the section on aluminum propeller blades, kind of looked at the criteria, and then looked up the manufacturer of that individual propeller blade and looked up their criteria as well, because they can add to, but they can't take away, right? And went off that, measured it, looked at it, thought about it for a few minutes, and told him, yes, it's repairable. He goes, okay, go ahead and repair it. So I broke out some cheesecloth and just very carefully blended that blade. And that was one of those things that, again, was something I'd never done before. And so I was glad that I had that exposure in the course, because they don't just walk you through things physically. They tell you where you can find it. And they kind of set you up, where manuals have tables of contents. They basically gave you a table of contents, so okay, if your aircraft weighs less than 12,500 pounds and you need to do X, Y, or Z, this is the section you want to look at. If it weighs more than 12,500 pounds, this is where you want to look. Things like that. And so I was able to use that to find the material and read it myself.
I am in awe of maintainers. I always will be, because that's all just magic to me. Like if someone dented a prop and say, is this doable? I'd be like, I don't know. I'd call a maintenance guy, because I don't think that way. Well, before we get into your skill bridge, I did want to just quickly highlight, you talked about COOL. If someone's not familiar with COOL or GI Bill, tuition assistance, VOC rehab, those are all a topic in and of itself, and we don't have to talk about it here and now. But the topic, just for folks to realize, as a drawer, as a compartment of information that you will need to look at and research as you pursue these ventures, is that drawer is funding. What pots of money do you have available to you as a veteran to pay for these things. Obviously, the GI Bill is available. You said it costs you 2 months for 2 weeks. It is what it is, right? You tried to use Cool. Cool is a pot of money. And so as you pursue this, obviously Dustin used his GI Bill, but definitely explore other things. There's scholarships. App.breakturn.com has over 1,000 scholarships that can be used. Some of them are very specific to maintainers. So if you have the forethought of what you want to do, that forethought should include exploring ways to pay for it that's not out of pocket and that may not touch your GI Bill if you don't want it to. So that's again, we don't have to go into that, but just something to chat about. If you don't mind, I would love to pivot to, so you did your AMP. I really appreciate you diving deep on that because it's this thing that people know about. I'm being told that I'm a military mechanic, that I can get my AMP, but we haven't really had someone tell a story about like what that journey looked like. And you said 2 weeks, Long Island, GI Bill. I want to pivot now to SkillBridge. So how did you learn about SkillBridge? What did you do for a SkillBridge? Why did you do it? Let's start talking about that SkillBridge piece if you could.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I learned about the SkillBridge through my SFL TAP program, and I got the website, dodskillbridge.com or .org or whatever it is, and I started looking on there for postings that they had. I also created my first LinkedIn account while I was in SFL TAP, and kind of started seeing what's out there and who, there's people out there to talk to, and all these other organizations. And I apologize, Austin, I don't know if it's allowed. You can edit this out if you want, but I went through a company called 50 Strong.
No, that's good.
Kind of help time people to skill bridges. Break turn wasn't a thing yet, and Candy Tillman, the lady that runs 50 Strong, wonderful lady, went through a bunch of seminars with them. It never led to anything for me, but those webinars, rather, they had representatives from a lot of companies at these webinars. And I was able to sit down at one point and I talked with people from Gulfstream. And I actually made a connection there at Gulfstream. I was trying to skill bridge with them originally, but unfortunately they didn't have anything out this way. And, part of the goal was to move back home to Arizona. But I also talked with Raytheon a lot and saw that Raytheon probably wasn't a place that, at least with my experience, that I could go. If I wanted to start over and be an engineer or something, great opportunity. But for just transitioning with my experience, it wasn't a place for me. There's a few other places I talked to, but those are the two that really stuck out. And they have those monthly, I think. And they have all kinds of companies there, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and like all these different companies. They're not targeted towards aviation. So a lot of just general corporation and business representatives and things like that. And so that was really cool because it got that face-to-face interaction and helped me understand a lot more things and help me understand a little more how to market my skills, because talking to some of those people, it's like, you kind of break off in your little breakout rooms and you get to chatting and it's like, I apologize for being ignorant, but is there anything at your company that you think this skill set would be good at? And sometimes it was no, sometimes it was, well, actually, let me get you in contact with this person. And so that helped. That kind of started my networking because I didn't know how to network, But anyway, so I ended up finding, I wanted to go through the SkillBridge. I wanted to make sure that I was using a DoD SkillBridge approved company. And so I got on their website and obviously Boeing, huge DoD partner and things like that. And I knew that they had a facility here in Mesa, Arizona. So I tried to reach out to the individual that was listed on the DoD SkillBridge website. The name was right, but they had a, SkillBridge unique email set up for that person, and that person did not use that email. And the phone number that was listed was just Boeing. It wasn't his phone number. It was just Boeing. And so that didn't really get me anywhere. And
Do you want to buy an airplane? Press 1. Do you want to buy a bomb? Press 2.
Are you having an issue with your 30 millimeter machine gun?
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to talk to Boeing, and a close personal childhood friend of mine was working for Boeing. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, man, I have this guy's name, but I don't have a direct contact for him. Would you mind maybe looking at your portal and seeing if you can get me a business line for him, either a business phone number or a business email? And he looks them up. He goes, oh, yeah, his actual job title is, like military relations or something like that. And so I guess that's all he does is the SkillBridge and internships and things like that. And so he got me his Boeing email. I reached out to him. He responded with Boeing's internal SkillBridge email that wasn't the one from the DoD website. And so we connected, and gosh, it went really fast from there. I think it took me a couple days to get the paperwork he wanted together. And about a week after that, he called me and said, "Hey man, I got a manager in Mesa that wants to bring you on board." And so we had to have a 3-way phone call with him, with that manager, talked a little bit more, and he's like, "Yeah, man, let's do it. Let's get this done." And that was in, I want to say, March of 2022. And I was getting out in November of 2022, and so May would be my 6-month mark. And so we set it up so that May 8th or 5th or something along those lines, I would be here in Mesa. And I did that. And we got it all set up. I came out here, I started working for them. And while that initial manager and the initial internship didn't really work out for me, they did offer me a job at the end, but it did not align with my financial needs and career goals. So I did end up with Boeing. That manager was with the DRO, the Department of Repair and Overhaul. They do gearbox and swash plate and rotor head and dampers and things like that, overhaul and repair for their global customers of the Apache. So everything from nose gearboxes to transmissions and whatnot. And so I was there the first week or so. I was kind of helping someone, clean parts and rebuild a gearbox or two. And then they realized, crap, you're still a DoD employee, which means we have a conflict of interest. You cannot affect products going out to other customers. And I was like, I didn't think about that. And they said, neither did we. So I was their first skill bridge. And so they kind of moved me over, had me start shadowing the manager, doing some administrative work. I built their on-the-job training program because they didn't have one at that point, which was really cool. I had some nice Boeing templates to go off of, and then turned that all into Boeing education and got that finalized and turned into official Boeing documents for their on-the-job training program and certifications. And then the work kind of ran out. And
That's a big deal, though. Before you go on, that's a big deal, man, to create a training program. I know Embry Riddle wrote an article, we'll post it in the show notes, about the fact that you wrote kind of an onboarding and training program for Boeing. So well done. I mean, that's no small feat. I know you're a humble guy, but that's a big deal.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a little scary, a little intimidating, and totally foreign. But I was glad that I did it, and it was really cool to see kind of behind the curtain, how the leadership works and how the education system works within Boeing. Their training and whatnot. But like I said, the work kind of ran out after that, and they weren't really sure what to do with me. So we reached out to Tiffany Bellows, wonderful woman, very nice individual and very professional and very bubbly and fun. But she was like, well, let me reach out to some of the other managers around the site and see, you're here I think I was there for 3 or 4 months because I wanted to have time to burn my terminal leave. So I didn't do the full 6 months. And so, she reached out and I went and worked with a gentleman in, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I worked with a gentleman in Phantom Works for about 2 weeks. That was really cool. Got to work on some really cool stuff over there. I won't say what, but, and then I got to move on from there, just because I was again, the same thing, being a current DoD employee, they were like, I don't know if it's okay to have you, in this area around this project or whatnot. And so I moved on from there to BT&E. Going test and evaluation. And that's where I ended up getting hired. That's where I received an offer and accepted it for the avionics integration labs. And so we were working on a lot of stuff for the current and next generation Apache helicopter. A lot of system integration, software integration, electrical modification and fabrication, things of the like. And that was a whole new world to me. I did not know electrical. I knew how to splice a wire, but that was about it. And I was a little intimidated by it, but thankfully I had a great mentor, a great teacher. And Boeing has a wonderful education program inside, or training program. And so I got to do a lot of what they call production certifications and different qualifications for electrical work and things like that. And I got to use those skills, learn a new language. And by that, I mean reading electrical engineering drawings and designs and translating that into physical things and understanding all the different components and wire types and connectors and blah, blah, blah. And so it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed learning all that. It was good work. I got to do a lot of lab operation and running emulators and simulators and working with all the different teams that work on the Apache, all the different engineering teams and systems teams and whatnot. And so that was really cool. It was a great exposure, and it really kind of opened my eyes to everything that goes into creating an aircraft or updating that same aircraft. And so that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I think kind of the point there that stood out to me was you decided to do a skill bridge, okay, and then you did your research, and then you found the number that didn't work, but you didn't just stop, right? So kind of you have to take control of your own path. Not that the military doesn't afford that per se, but at the same time, they kind of tell you where you're going to go. To have that realization as you're getting out that, hey, sometimes you're going to get told no 4 times, and you have to ask a 5th time to get what you need to do. So that's a point there I wanted to highlight. The second one was you did a lot of jobs, man. It wasn't just I'm going to go in and do the thing I've been doing. When we talked earlier, you said that you were very uncomfortable with the whole electric department doing all of that stuff. But what's cool is that I'm going to ask you to go on with your story. Those things, those jobs you did, administrative, you wrote SOPs and training pipelines, you worked in this electrical thing. How did that set you up for what's next in the story? If you want to tell that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a mechanically inclined individual. I've always kind of known how to turn a wrench and work on engines and stuff like that. But electrical is one of those things that you don't just know it. That's something you really got to learn. And so I feel like that was the one thing missing from my breadth of experience and knowledge. And adding that in there kind of was like the final piece in the puzzle. And I just felt probably a little absurdly confident after that. It was like, now I know that I can work on every part of an aircraft. I know that I can do that. While the A&P technically means you can do electrical, there's very little electrical in the evaluation process for an A&P. And so having that in-depth and extensive electrical experience and role was, again, the kind of that missing piece. And from there on, I was like, I can do anything on aircraft. And, unfortunately, Boeing's taken some hits the last year or so, and they started a 10% enterprise-wide layoff. Unfortunately, I was part of that. That being said, Boeing's a wonderful place to work. And even though I was laid off, I would still work for Boeing again. And I think that speaks volumes to the company. I started looking for jobs before I even got a layoff notice, just because I knew there was a possibility. 10% of that company is 17,000 people. That's a lot of people getting laid off, And so I started looking at jobs. And then when I did get my layoff notice, thankfully the very next day I had several job interviews. And I knew that if I was leaving Boeing, I kind of wanted to transition back into general aviation because I had that A&P, but I didn't have the work experience in general aviation. So yeah, I ended up at United Aviate or Aviate's United Academy, United's Aviate Academy. I apologize. And so there I work on a fleet of 80 aircraft, 75 Cirrus SR-20s, and now it's 7 DA-42 Diamonds. And that was, thankfully, I was able to pick it up really quickly, but that was the little bit of experience that was missing, is working directly on general aviation, small aircraft. And they have so many of them that there is loads of work to do. So I got to hit the ground running there again, and I've been there for 3 months now. And so I got that experience as well.
So I want to point out too that I think it would be easy to read this as like, well, going through a furlough, like that's not something that we're used to at all in the military. Like we don't even have that's a complete paradigm shift for us. It's not something we're ever worried about. And then to have it happen kind of so early on after you get out seems like it would be a little earth shattering. But I would say on the positive side, I would consider that a SkillBridge win, because what SkillBridge gave you was it gave you kind of the additional experience that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. It gave Boeing an additional reason to bring you on and do an internship and do a SkillBridge with you, that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have done. Maybe they would have, but maybe not. And so now you've kind of tried your hand at all these other things. And so even though you do ultimately get furloughed, that SkillBridge gave you, months and months of kind of bonus time that you otherwise and bonus experience that you otherwise wouldn't have had happen, which then translates to, okay, now I'm furloughed. Oh, that stinks. But also now I've got this extra stuff on my resume that otherwise I wouldn't have had. And so now I get hired somewhere else, in pretty short order. What was that gap between the time you got furloughed and you started United Aviate?
So I got notified the first week of December that I was being laid off. The very next day I had the interview. I had like probably 8 or 9 different interviews. And Aviate was the best offer. I was able to select the best offer instead of just taking what was available, which was awesome. My last working day with Boeing was December 20th, but I was still employed and paid I had a non-working period from December 21st to February 21st. And so I was able to start my new job. And for a while there, I was getting 2 paychecks because of their whole layoff program. They didn't want to throw you to the wind. And so I was still employed until February 21st. And after that, I received 4 weeks of severance. So, I was essentially paid through the end of March through Boeing, and I've been working for, Aviate since January. And so
amazing.
That was a huge benefit for me. And like you said, with the SkillBridge, I tell everyone it was worth its weight in gold. Because I would have never applied for an electrical position at Boeing coming straight out of the Army. If I did no SkillBridge, if I just ETS'd and went on my merry way and tried to figure it out on my own, there's no world where I would have applied for a electrical position job or electrical position with Boeing. And at that, they brought me on as a level 3 because they got to meet me in person and work with me and see my aptitude and see my, level of competence, and that I am teachable and that I understand things they say to me. Because obviously I did work during the internship. It just wasn't, like full on all day by myself doing wiring. I was with the gentleman who ended up mentoring me, and they were like, you know what? Yeah, we want to make sure this guy comes on board, and we want to make sure that he's not losing a ton of money by doing it. And we know that if we teach him, he's going to be good. And so they brought me on as a level 3 out of only 5 levels. And so I was able to earn an acceptable wage and learn a new skill at the same time.
That's huge. Yeah, the biggest concerns with the transition I would propose for the conversation is obviously the money. I need to pay my bills, and then like the benefits. Like, am I going to get health care? Am I going to get some sort of retirement package type things? The being able to market yourself, getting that level 3 job is huge. So you went to Aviate, and then I felt like there was one other. It was you're not there now. You went you use all that experience and you use that to do another jump, I think, right?
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of a jump right now. I start
Yes.
with Gulfstream later this month.
Oh, wow.
That was in December when I was applying to all those jobs. I applied for and interviewed for the senior operations manager at Gulfstream's new Mesa location. It's a massive MRO here in Arizona. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility for the manufacturer Gulfstream, because they also sustain and maintain their customers' aircraft once they sell them. So they're not just a manufacturer, they're also a maintainer and service provider. And anyway, so I applied for that role. It might have been a little ambitious, but I just graduated with my bachelor's degree in aviation maintenance, and it was the first job I've seen that requires a bachelor's degree in aviation maintenance. And with my prior maintenance management experience and things like that, I definitely was chomping at the bit a little bit. I really was excited for the opportunity to possibly get that job. And so I interviewed, and like I said, I wasn't selected, unfortunately, but that interview is what led to this job, because the maintenance manager was on that board or table that met with me, and he calls me up first week of March, and he says, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I know this is really probably unorthodox, me reaching out to you like this." He's like, "But I have this position that I've been trying to fill for several months now, and I'm not having any luck with it. And I thought back and I remembered the interview with you, and I'm sorry you didn't get that job, but if you've got a few minutes and you're willing to hear me out, I think you'd be great for this level 4 technician spot that I have here at Gulfstream." And I said, "Absolutely, no problem. I'd like to hear you out." And so we go through it, and the more he talks, the more I'm like, yeah, that sounds just like my experience, and I think that I could do well there. As well as all the training opportunities and certification opportunities through Gulfstream, the different type certifications that I can get. And then we get to the end, and he goes, "And if you don't mind," he's like, "because we've already met and talked in person, not for this job, but because we've met, HR gave me the go ahead to tell you the compensation, if you don't mind." And I was like, "Absolutely, why not?" And he told me the compensation, and I was like, "Okay, yeah." Not to get too into money, but it was a significant jump from my current role. And this role was the role that I'm currently in was the best offer that I received at the time. And so, I thought about it for a little bit, and me as a person, very loyal and whatnot, I felt a little bad because I just started this job, and I like this job. I like the people, but I couldn't turn down the money, the benefits, the education benefits. So I let my manager know, turned in my 2 weeks, and I'm getting ready to start at Gulfstream on the 14th.
Dude,
So
congrats.
you're like 2.5-ish years from being out of the military, right? At this point.
Yeah.
And so how does the kind of incrementally, so you leave the military, you go to Boeing, you go from Boeing to United Aviate, you go from United Aviate to Gulfstream. You don't have to get too specific about it, but kind of how does that compare financially to the military as an E5, BAH, base pay, all the other stuff?
When I first joined Boeing, I felt like I was losing a little bit of money each month. Not a lot. I think in my head it was about $200, maybe $250 a month compared to my Army pay. Mind you, that's after 8 years as an E5 with a family and BAH and all that. And so I had worked up to where I was in the Army financially. But then I realized that the 401k alone, so much more was going towards my retirement. Boeing at the time had a 10%. I don't know what it is now, but they had a 10% matching. And so if I was putting in 10% of my paycheck, they were matching that 10%. And, the sheer volume of money that was going, especially when I had, heavy overtime weeks and things like that, the amount of money that was going to my retirement that never did while I was in the Army I started to see the benefits, and then after the first year, actually I started in September and they do their raises and your evaluations and stuff in March. By March, they had seen enough that they gave me a raise with everyone else when we hit March. And then the following year, I got another raise. And so by the time I left after 2.5 years or 2 years, by the time I left, I was making, at least base salary wise, I was making probably, I don't know, 7 or 8,000 more than I was making in the Army. And since then, I had improved my financial situation each month, which is a huge thing I recommend to everyone. So, less of my money was going out after it came to me, and that was nice. And that's just base salary. The first year I was there, I worked, 900 hours of overtime, which I don't recommend to anyone. The money's great, but gosh, that's a lot of time away from home.
Well, but that's something that I think military, we're not used to thinking in those terms, because you work 12 hours a day and, sorry, that's just what you work. Sometimes 14, maybe in Delta Company you worked more. When you're a crew chief, you get a little bit protected sometimes if you have to go fly the next day. So you've got some duty day protections, but if you work 12 hours a day, sorry, sucks to suck. There's no such thing as overtime, and you got a base salary, and that's all you'll ever have is your base salary. But the additional, kind of overtimes, and it's true for maintainers, but it's true for pilots and kind of across the board for everybody, and it goes beyond those as well. Kind of anything just in the civilian employment realm. If you work extra, you get paid extra in aviation. And so that's not something we're used to dealing with, is like, well, hey, this is what I make in terms of base salary, but I've got a capacity to make way more if I'm willing to work more.
Yeah. And it all depends on the company and the work you do, and if they have the need for overtime. Thankfully that role did, and that afforded me a significant amount more than what I was earning in the Army. And it enabled me to, buy my first home and things like that. And so, at first I was really, intimidated about getting out of the military, and probably 6 months after I was officially out of the military, I was grateful that I had done it, because I was able to start providing a whole different quality of life for my family than what I had in the Army. And that's nothing against the Army at all, but I wasn't buying a home in the Army because I knew that I was going to move again, most likely. And so to be able to come home and settle down and now have the finances available to buy a home without crippling myself, it was great.
I love that. And I love the story because I'll talk about it, but to hear your story is kind of an actual example is, sometimes if you want to go from A to C, you have to stop at B first. Someone might say oh, Boeing, and then you got furloughed, and someone would say well, I'm not going to go to a United Aviate where I'm working on GA stuff. I don't want to do that, and it's well, hey man, look, you may not want to do it, and you did want to do it, but if that's what you need to do to get to the next thing, I mean, you went from being a Blackhawk crew chief, which is an awesome job, to a senior guy at Gulfstream, which from what I understand is a very, very hard company to get into. And that's because you kept the path, you kept moving, you kept collecting skill sets. And one thing I wanted to talk about in this piece is that networking piece. I mean, that's powerful that this dude that you talked to, you said months or years prior, who couldn't offer you a job, sought you out and was eager to get to talk to you to offer you a job. And that all comes with networking. It's putting yourself out there, telling your story, saying yes, doing your job well, being a good person. Those opportunities, while they may be delayed, a month or a year or two, it all comes back. And aviation is such a small community. Would you say that you actively networked, or was it more of a passive, you just tried to get around? And how did that help you with these opportunities, whether it's United Aviate or Gulfstream?
I went through cycles for sure. I mean, it's not a constant thing. There was definitely times where I was actively trying to network and searching out, because when you get on LinkedIn and things like that, you can just type in, aircraft maintainer or aircraft maintenance supervisor or things like that, and find people, with similar backgrounds or similar locations to yours or experiences yours. And so there were times I was definitely seeking people out. I went to a couple of conventions, both through, I went to the AUSA and Quad A conventions through the military. And I went to a couple of, was it the Aviation Maintenance Council or Council of Aviation Maintenance or something like that? Went to one of those and was actively trying to seek people out. And other times it was just kind of passively, I meet someone and I find out that they're in this role or they're in this field or they work for this company. And I'm like, oh, hey, would you know anyone that I could maybe look to mentor or to maybe give me some input on what I could do to better my chances of employment, or, and every now and then I bump into someone who was a direct network connection that I needed. And it just kind of happens over time. So like I said, it goes in waves, Yeah.
And you went to get your degree as well, which you were telling me something interesting that because you had your AMP, it was worth some amount of college credits. I did not know that. What was the value that you told me?
So I went through Embry-Riddle, Eagles for life, and but I went through Embry-Riddle for my associates and bachelors in aviation maintenance. And when I called them up, it was shortly after I earned my AMP. I want to say this was January of 2020, because I had heard that there might be some transfer credit for a maintenance degree for my military experience. I didn't think about the AMP. And I'm on the phone with them and they're like, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have an AMP? And I said, actually, yes, I do have an AMP. And they're like, oh, great. Well, that's worth 33 credit hours towards your bachelor's degree, which,
33.
Yep, 33. So, average class is 3 credit hours per class. So that was 11 classes. Essentially, it took care of all the in-person hands-on maintenance classes that are required in that degree, where if you went to the college, you'd actually be in a hangar working on aircraft for those credits. And so I did that. I started taking college classes through the Army through tuition assistance, which kind of limited me because it's, what was it? At the time, it was $4,000 a year for tuition assistance. And with the discounted tuition for military through Embry-Riddle, that paid for, I think, 4 or 5 classes a year. And so I was able to start taking classes, and I finished my my associate's degree 3 months after I got out of the Army, 3 months after I ETS'd. I finished my associate's in January of 2023, and Boeing paid for the final course for that. I needed one more class to graduate when I started there. And so they were able to knock that out for me. And so I did that. And as you mentioned, the university contacted me, thought I'd be a good candidate for their student highlight to kind of motivate potential students and share my story. So I did. And then I got to grinding and knocked out my bachelor's. I took 16 classes in 1 year, thanks to Boeing's Learning Together program. Absolutely phenomenal education benefit. I wish more companies did that. And so I was able to finish my bachelor's. I graduated and walked across the Prescott stage, the Prescott campus at Embry-Riddle, in December of 2024. And now I have an appointment in a couple weeks to meet with the VA. I applied for the VRE program to see if they would pay for my master's degree. And if they will, awesome. If they won't, then I'll go ahead and use my GI Bill, another wonderful benefit that we veterans have. And I'm going to be pursuing a master's degree in aviation and aerospace management through Purdue.
Purdue's another big aviation college too, right?
Yeah, well, and the great thing is that also, getting your associate's degree, saving those 33 credits by getting your AMP. It was a little bit of, financial output and time output to go up to Long Island and do all that. But what you ultimately did is 33 credit hours. That's a year. You saved yourself 10 or 12 months of GI Bill.
Yep.
And so now if the VRE thing doesn't work out for whatever reason, there's a lot of nuance to that program, obviously. Again, that's its own whole own block. It's going to be its whole section in the Brake Turn Academy, but you still save yourself your GI Bill. And so if you need it, it's still there. And if you don't, make those kind of smaller, one thing that I keep hearing you say, and every time that you're saying it is I'm like, man, he keeps making really smart investments in himself. And I think that I've heard, again, talking to service members, a lot of times I think it's easy to get, this might sound a little bit rough, but we do get a little bit entitled. And I'm saying this from myself. And we think everything should be free. And we don't think anything should be pay to play. That's not reality. The reality is that you do have to pay for things, but I would see them as investments. Like I said, that you've kind of made throughout your time when you were still in the Army, and you continue to make in yourself. Don't view those as pay to play. View them as investments. And some people are willing to make investments, and some people are not willing to make investments, or not able to for some reason. But if you're willing and you've got the capacity to make those investments, and you're wise about it, it will pay off. I think Landon and I have both seen that on the pilot side, investing in ourselves in different ways. And that's one thing that I hear you saying, me reading between the lines, but investing in yourself, not looking at it as a pay to play, but looking at it as an investment. And ultimately it is things that pay off, because companies do value experience, but they also value education.
Yeah. And if you have a combination of the two, they just solidify each other. They complement each other. The experience makes the degree worth a lot more, and the degree makes your experience, it shows a lot more. And like you said, investing in yourself, and it wasn't always easy. It wasn't just a simple decision. When I first started college, I'm not going to lie, I failed. I failed a couple classes. It was hard for me to fit that into my military career. It was hard for me to fit it into my daily life, especially when I was working, 14 hours a day or something like that. And we had a heavy mission load or something big coming up, things like that, and trying to be a husband and trying to do my own thing, when I had spare time. But at the same time, I try to look at things as logically as I can and as systematically as I can. And I don't like wasting time. And that's a big thing. And so some people would say to me sometimes, dude, why don't you slow down and take one class at a time? Well, because if I take one class at a time, it's going to take me 7 years to finish this degree. I don't want to make money in 7 years. I want to make money tomorrow, And so I would
That's
do
good.
2 or 3 classes at a time when I could. And like I said, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of, figuring out things to afford more time in the day. If it was prepping my food for the week, if it was making sure that I dedicated Saturday to family time so that, I knew that I was doing that. If it was, scheduling my tasks or planning out each day to make sure that I was leaving work right on time. And as soon as I got done with work, I could go do that errand, or I could go home and dedicate 2 hours to this assignment or 2 hours to my schoolwork. It was a giant pain in the butt. And there are times I wanted to beat my head against the wall, but it paid off. And while it's difficult to do those things, I tell everyone you have to do it. It's not hard. It's hard. They talk about it when they say it's going to be hard. They talk about it like it's impossible. People talk themselves out of doing things because they're like, oh, well, I'll have to do A, B, and C. Okay, well, do them. Or think about it another way and find a way to make it only I have to do A and B. There's so many things that you can do to fit those things into your life if you really want it. And like I said, I'm not about wasting time. So why take 7 years to finish a degree that I can do in 2?
Yeah, you'd still be in college right now. And there's the phrase that I'll just make up. Maybe it's made up, suffer now or suffer later. Right. So it's like, oh, I'm going to suffer now. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm going to take all these classes and go to work and try to have a personal life. It's like, yeah, it kind of sucks. But at the end of the day, like, let's just get it over with. Not that we're not valuing those things. Those things do have value. But why elongate that if we don't have to? And your story is interesting too, we are recording in 2025, but just the absolute demand for AMPs in this season of aviation is profound. I think Austin had found something out at VAI about that, but like, you're just in such a great position, and the people that are behind you are looking to do this. Like, now is a great time. I mean, Austin, didn't you hear something at VAI about just the demand for maintainers right now?
Yeah, so I sat in on a couple seminars, talked to a few presidents of companies, owners of companies, some of our partners at Break Turn, and some non. It's kind of funny because I think everybody, when you talk about aviation industry in general, they focus on kind of the shiny object. The shiny object in hiring is pilots. And it's kind of a more pilot-centric or pilot-run industry, if you will. I would say if you want to equate it to the medical profession. If you talk medical profession, people talk about doctors. But when you're talking about the medical profession in general, if you start scratching under the surface a little bit, nurses are needed as bad or worse. And nothing that the doctors do is happening without the nurses. If they don't have somebody, if they don't have an OR tech to hand them the instrument, they're not doing any surgeries. And that's kind of, I would equate that to the maintainers in the same light as that. At VAI, everybody would start talking to me about pilots. And I don't know if it's because they know I'm a pilot or if it's because, again, the pilots are just kind of the shiny object, but they would start talking about pilots. The industry needs 8,000 helicopter pilots alone by 2030, and we only make 900 a year. Those are not good numbers. And so they're pretty, I think scared is maybe even a good word for that, because they just don't know how to solve that problem, which means there's a lot of opportunity if you are a helicopter pilot. But so they would start bringing that up, and I would say, okay, so pilots, great. Tell me about maintainers. And they would go, oh my gosh, if you think the pilots are bad, if you think those numbers are bad, and then they would start going on and on about how bad it is for them to find maintainers right now. And what that means is there's a lot of opportunity for maintainers. And eventually, I was talking to another pilot about this yesterday. Eventually, AI is going to do a lot of jobs that pilots are going to do right now. And UAS and UAV and unmanned is going to do it. So, even moving blood, for instance, that's something that helicopter EMS guys do a lot of. Helicopters aren't going to be doing that in the near future. That's going to be a unmanned system moving it from point A to point B, because they can do it in lower weather. They can do it for cheaper. And so that is going to take a lot of pilot jobs away, but AI is not taking maintainer jobs away anytime soon, because we just lack the capacity to link the AI on one side, or the computer learning or computer abilities on one side, with the physical ability to manipulate tools, because it's more of a generalist thing. So the maintenance jobs aren't going to get taken over by AI anywhere near as fast as pilots, I don't think. And that's really where there are a ton of opportunities. And if I had to bet those 17-ish thousand people that lost their jobs at Boeing, the maintainers, I'll bet you that they've all got jobs already, or almost all of them. You're talking about having 7 different job opportunities and picking from the best of those. 2025, we're trying to make it the year of the maintainer, not just because we care about maintainers as far as what BreakTurn is trying to do, not just because we care about maintainers, which we do, we love maintainers, but because there's a huge need. Like America and the world needs maintainers. We need people to stay in that business and to get better at it and to invest in themselves and become more kind of capable of doing their jobs.
Yeah.
And to bring in the next generation of people, because those jobs are not going away, and the airplanes aren't flying, the helicopters aren't flying if there's not people to fix them. And that means there's a ton of opportunity in terms of lifestyle and quality of life and pay and benefits and all this other stuff, because those have to go up to encourage people to get in it too and stay in the profession. And so it's kind of an amazing time for maintainers as well. So that's what I learned at BAI, is that the industry needs them, and we're going to try to help with that as best we can. So.
Yeah, and I understand the corporate level, the business level of it. I think you guys said you spoke with the Delta Tech Ops leader, and spoke to the value of the A&P and what it means to the corporation, what it means to these entities and things like that. And those are all great points, but I like to speak to it in something that's relatable, and I like to speak to maintainers in the fact it's important to you. It increases what you can earn. It increases where the number of opportunities, because you're no longer a liability. When you're an unlicensed mechanic, great, you have experience, but you're still a liability to the company because you are not an FAA certified mechanic, and you have to work under the supervision of an FAA certified mechanic. That's the only way that you can legally do that work. And so now part of the reason that your pay is decreased is because you are now someone else is responsible for you and your work. And so when you're licensed, you're opening those opportunities for yourself, and you're able to market yourself and your certification, and you're no longer that liability. Now you're an asset. And so many maintainers I've met over the years, whether it's in the military or civilian, they're like, yeah, no, I haven't got the A&P because I don't need it. I can still work. It's like, okay, but just by having it, you can make $5 more an hour. $5 more an hour is $10,000 a year and some change. Like, that's huge. That's not.
It's more than that when you're doing overtime.
Right. And so, and it increases the number of places you can go. Because I have heard of some people being hired by the airlines as an unlicensed maintainer, whether they just came from the schoolhouse and they're doing like the apprenticeship thing, or they didn't go to a schoolhouse and they want to become an apprentice. I don't really hear too much about that anymore, maybe back in the day. But even like United Aviate, they have several apprentices there that were part of a apprenticeship program. You got to have those 3 years of experience, right? And so they started with no experience, came on at $15 an hour or something like that. And now they're now they've been there 2 years, but the apprenticeship program is gone. They're just grandfathered in because they were already there. And so they're not doing that anymore, And so those apprenticeship things are few and far between nowadays because there's so many schools available, and there's so much risk with having someone who's not certified. And a lot of places don't want to take that risk. And so it really is just a huge marketing tool and bargaining chip for yourself. And, why earn less than you're capable of earning for a couple extra steps of paperwork and a couple tests? You know what I mean? That's
no, for sure. And we had talked earlier, and we'll probably get to the last few questions here. Like, if you're doing maintenance in the military, and my brother was a crew chief, and he didn't want to do maintenance outside the military, which is fine. Even if you're in that position, but go get the rating, man. Go get the license. In worst case, that is a hard skill set that you have that does have career progression potential. Even if you're like, I don't want to do that. I mean, there's tons of differences between military and commercial maintenance, whether it's hours you work, like Austin was saying, if you work for your 8 hours with your 1 hour lunch break, anything over that is overtime and you get paid more. Right? You're not deploying. You get the parts, you get you get the healthcare. Like, it's not the same. And a lot of people think, well, I don't want to keep doing this. It's like, okay, yes, I don't want you to keep doing this too, but that over there, it's different. Yes, it's still in the same arena, the same category, but don't say no to that because you think it's the same as what this is. And Dustin, I'm sure you've seen the differences between working maintenance on the DoD side and the civilian side. I mean, is there a difference?
Yeah. Parts availability is a huge one. Military, pretty much everywhere I went, we're always working on some sort of budget constriction at some point. You know what I mean? How are we going to get this engine? How are we going to get that part? Oh, we got to wait a couple days to get that part here. And helicopters are violent machines. They go through parts a lot faster, I've noticed, than most general aviation aircraft. But it's also much more relaxed. No one's going to scream at you or make you do push-ups if you mess up. And so that was kind of a nice change, because I didn't see it so much later in my career. But man, as a young soldier, There was definitely some screaming, there was definitely some push-ups, and there's definitely some days where I couldn't walk right. But they make the joke, there's strong soldiers and there's smart soldiers. I think that I was a strong soldier when I was young, and I became a smart soldier over time.
No,
But
that's
sorry,
awesome.
just to backtrack a little bit, you made the comment about the pools of money that are available for these different things. And one thing that I thought I'd like to mention is the VA also provides reimbursement opportunities for the cost of evaluations, tests, and certification processes. And so when I paid that $850 to the DME for the DME fee, as soon as I got back, I forget the name of the form, but I filled out a VA form, emailed it in, and they reimbursed me that full $850 for that evaluation. And so really, I didn't come out of pocket at all for that course or the testing. And I just wanted to mention that because I thought that might be useful to someone who's considering going, but they're not sure about fronting that kind of money.
Yeah, and it's the power of knowledge there, which is awesome. Well, I think unless I missed something, Austin, I was going to ask just kind of like the last few questions here. Did I miss anything on the?
No, I think we're doing good.
We're about 90 minutes in, so I think your story has been awesome. We talked about what your experience was in the military. We talked about your pursuit of the A&P while you were still in. You searched out a school online, though some people recommended that, so insert networking queue there. Use GI Bill to go pay for that 2-week course to give you those specific skills to be able to pass your A&P tests, your written, your oral, and your practical. And then you leveraged your SkillBridge opportunity through some work of finding the right person to talk to at Boeing. You did a lot of things at Boeing, some things you were uncomfortable with, but that sets you up for success. When you got furloughed from Boeing, you were able to immediately pick up another job. It was a great job at United Aviate. And then an opportunity presented itself, again, because of your efforts and because of your networking ability, to go to Gulfstream and have a pretty dang good job all in 24 months. I mean, that's wild. So the question I would have is the top 3 things you wish you knew before leaving the military. That could be what we're talking about specific or something non-related, like make sure you get your license plate, like something that's not related or can be related. And then also, so after that question, the next one is the first steps that you would recommend for someone to take if they want to pursue the route that you took.
As far as the things that I wish I knew, really network. I wish that I knew that. I wish that I knew how to network. I wish that I started sooner. And that would be the second point is I wish that I knew to start sooner. And so anyone I meet, anyone I talk to, service members, I've actually had quite a few people that are current service members that have seen the article on me from Embry-Riddle and reached out to me on LinkedIn, hey man, I'm 18 months from getting out and I want to transition into the civilian marketplace. Do you have any advice? Can you look at my resume for me? And I'm happy to do those things. I mean, obviously I'm not, a professional career counselor or resume, consultant or anything like that. But if I can help them even a little bit, that's huge for me. I'm sorry, what was the last thing I wanted to say?
Oh, sorry.
The possibilities. There was so much that I was blind to. When I was in the military, the green grass on the other side of the fence was always go work for the airlines and be an airplane mechanic. And when I got out and through that Boeing job and through the networking and through all these other interviews I've had, I didn't realize the number of things. It's not just I can fix a helicopter or I can learn how to fix an airplane. I mean, I was a level 3 electronics technician for Boeing Test and Evaluation, working on the next generation Apache development team. You know what I mean?
As a Blackhawk guy.
Right. How would I know that was in my purview or that was something that was possible for me? And that's where that networking thing comes in again. And I think that we have to take it upon ourselves. We have to learn that stuff and we have to go to these seminars and go to these webinars and go to these conventions and learn these things and meet people. Because if I hadn't branched out on that internship and just stuck with the DRO and accepted that job offer, which by the way was only $26 an hour, which would have been a huge loss for me leaving the military, I would have been losing tens of thousands. I would have lost $15,000 a year or $20,000 a year right off the bat. And if I had just said, oh, well, I guess this is what I got and stayed there. So again, just, finding the possibilities and opening my mind and opening what I think is possible is huge, or opening your mind to what you think is possible and finding a place that you're not necessarily a direct fit, but you can make it work and it's going to benefit you. That would be a huge thing.
No, that's awesome. I love that. And then if someone were to like,
can I address commanders for 1 second? So
go for it.
This may have to get cut. I'm going to try not to curse. No, I'm just kidding. So, Leon, you're a former commander, but I just want to address the commanders real quick because obviously one of the biggest hurdles to SkillBridge is getting command approval, or getting command approval for the kind of as many days as possible. And so I think one of the things that we've really over the course of this interview kind of unpacked is how beneficial SkillBridge was for you, and how it played out over a period of time to impact things that happen years later, either through relationships or through timing. And then a furlough happens, and then you're able to go straight from a furlough without actually, at some point, you're double dipping, not missing a paycheck, but able to get 2 paychecks at a time for a period. And how beneficial SkillBridge was in that sense. And, even the pay you were just talking about, that's like a $10 an hour difference. That's 25-30% of your paycheck difference. That's how much it would have affected you. So I know that it can be really challenging for commanders, because they do ultimately the answer to the president in terms of manning, Secretary of Defense, and all the way down, they've all got bosses that they have to answer to, and those helicopters have to run, those airplanes have to run. But when it comes to their service member, I wish that they would do everything possible. And some of them are. A lot of them are. I know when I got out, my chain of command did, and yours did, Landon's did. But a lot of times they're not, and they view SkillBridge as an enemy that's sucking things away, as opposed to viewing it as doing the right thing to your subordinate and making sure that they're set up, because we're not all going to be in the military forever. And those commanders aren't going to be in the military forever. And when they get out, they're going to look back and hopefully they'll have a good experience with their boss and their boss's boss. But they need to keep that in mind too, that they're not going to be in the military forever, and just put the shoe on the other foot of, how do I do the right thing as a commander to my subordinates to make sure that them and their families are taken care of the day that they get out of the military, because I'm not going to own them forever. I'm just renting them. And the American people are just renting us at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I've heard, one guy couldn't go on a skill bridge because there was 3 people in the battalion already out on a skill bridge. And I'm like, okay, your battalion's 300 or 400 people. So even at 3 people, you're at 1%. And so that was something that, and I don't know all the details. I don't know if there are 3 people from the same company or anything like that, but those numbers right there, I was like, that sucks. I mean, that's not a good, why have the program if people can't take advantage of it? Now, obviously, if 50% of the company or 50% of a unit wants to go out on it, that's a huge problem. But that was something that I'm like, man, there's how hard it is for us to use the benefits. And I saw this the whole time I was in the Army. They preach, you need to use these benefits. You have these benefits. Here's these programs. But then the minute you try to use them, it is like navigating a minefield. And it is, even for me, it was a long, difficult process to get that skill bridge and to get it approved and to get the move and everything else figured out. And I think that as a military, we need to do better about that, but that's above my pay grade. So
to piggyback off what the Sergeant Major said, I think that's definitely it's two-way street. For the service members that are still in, this may sting a little, but I would recommend that 2 years out, you bring up the idea of March of 2027, I would be looking to transition. I'm not saying I'm getting out. I'm not saying I'm not re-enlisting, but I'm just exploring my options. But 2 years out, I might be getting out. And so whether you're doing your quarterly counseling, which I know everybody does without fail, we do our quarterly counseling, but just bring it up. Because if you're telling your chain of command 2 years out, and then Landon, my commander, switches out every year, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the scenario. But if you're trying to put yourself in a position 2 years out to get that time afforded to you, it'll make it less difficult for them to approve it and more difficult for them to deny it. And to the commanders and first sergeants and sergeants major and all those folks, I would say that you are unable to take care of your soldiers and sailors and airmen when they get out. You are unable to do that anymore. But we can. We as break turn, we as the civilian folk, right? We can help take care of your service members when they get out. You cannot anymore. So allow us to teach, coach, mentor, and guide these service members while they're still in with the skill bridge or with going to Long Island to get their AMP or whatever the case may be, to set them up for success. We care about our service members while we're in, but then when it comes time to drop them off on the curb with their bags, it's like, well, sorry, can't give you what you need, obviously with correct communication, right? And we shouldn't do that. We should finish strong as leaders, as commanders in the military to set them up for success. So I love that, man. I think the last thing, just any sort of final thoughts. We talked about a lot, but just I did want to mention before your final thoughts, we'll have some resources posted in the show notes and on the website. We'll write an article that kind of summarizes what we talked about. We'll put your LinkedIn in here, the articles that Ember Riddle wrote about you, just for people to. It's not about Dustin necessarily, but you're a guy that can help others kind of discover what they want to do. So we want to share that with everybody. Breakturn.com, the maintenance pipeline on app.breakturn.com. So those will all be published. But what are some final thoughts, man? What are some things you want to tell everybody and encourage them with?
Yeah, you can do it. I'm not special. I'm not an exception to the norm. There's there's ordinary and then there's extraordinary. And I think I'm right there in the middle. I'm extraordinary. I haven't done anything crazy. I had a good 8 years in the Army and I didn't want to waste that. And I wanted to make it more valuable. And that's why I went to college. That's why I went to Embry-Riddle. I wanted to, really highlight the strengths, and I'm passionate about aviation maintenance. I've seen what happens when it goes wrong. And, in the military, they drill into your head, you mess this up and people die. And that's something I care about. I don't like when people are lackadaisical with it. And that's why I wanted to continue getting certifications and become a leader and be able to instill that in other people coming up in aviation maintenance, and it's always about the next generation. It's always about the next group of people that are going to do it. And if what I did or all the hardship I went through and how hard it was for me to achieve these things or to find the right contacts or to use those programs, if that's easier from having talked to me, then mission accomplished. I want it to be easier. I want people to be able to get out and do what I did, but do it easier and do it faster and be able to go higher than I have or I will. And that's the goal here.
Love that. Nobody got where they are by themselves, and there are no exceptions. That's one of my favorite quotes. Austin, any final thoughts?
No, I think that was a great place to stop. As somebody that, formerly worked with Dustin, I've been proud to watch his journey, and I hope everybody finds it really encouraging. He kind of hit all the right notes on his way out, and yeah, anybody can do it. It's other people have done it before you. You just have to find the right pathway that works for you and for your family. And Dustin has shown a way to do it that I think is really good. It's not the way to do it, but it is a way to do it. And we're happy to have him.
Glad to be here.
I love it. Well, I encourage people to reach out to Dustin. We'll post his information. Reach out to us at Break Turn. Dustin's number one tip, pro tip, was network. And what that means is physically reach out and talk to somebody. Reach out and ask questions and start that problem-solving process. So if you watch this and you think someone else has value watching it, send it to them and really just share the love. All us service members need to help each other out. Dustin, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming out and telling us your story. I think it was awesome, and we look forward to doing it again, hopefully once your next chapter gets going. So
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.